Why did men stop wearing the mutton chop? The mutton chop is a partial beard style that really is categorized by an immense amount of hair on the side of the face, where typically we see as the modern sideburn. It was actually really well known in the 1850s through about the 1890s, and it was actually one of the reasons it got predominance is because of General Ambrose Burnside. Yes, Burnside. It's not much a general that we remember him for, but the extreme facial hair is what we know him by. And because his name was Burnside, we actually morphed in from mutton chop into sideburns. So that's actually where we get the term sideburn. At the time, plenty of officers and military people were sporting this type of hair. There were lots of whiskers going on in the mid to late 1800s. This style was very popular. It would come and go, but there were always someone wearing the sideburn, the mutton chop. There were actually presidents who sported this style, some of them a little earlier than 1850, but you have John Quincy Adams, you have Martin Van Buren, both wearing extreme facial hair in the form of a partial beard. They actually wore it pretty much their entire adult lives. It became very popular through the end of the 1800s. Making the turn of the century. It started falling out of fashion a little bit in favor of the full beard. Just like World War I ended the full beard, it would bring an end and a demise to the mutton chop also. It would be until the 1950s that you would get another version of the mutton chop. This time, much more tame and known by what we know it now as the sideburn. It was actually in the late 50s that you got the likes of Elvis and the cartoon version, Danny from Greece, wearing a longer sideburn. This was actually significant in the 1950s when most guys wore very short military haircuts and very short sideburns. And so anyone in pop culture wearing a long sider was seen as definitely an outsider, a little rebellious. Moving Elvis into the 60s, you would see him growing his sideburns longer. And he would actually sport a longer sideburn throughout the majority of the 60s. But it wasn't until the end of the 60s where we have, with the Elvis comeback tour and the Elvis that we know in the 70s, Las Vegas Elvis, the real mutton chop would appear. By the 80s, smooth faces were coming into style, but sure enough, the sideburn would make an appearance. And for many men, especially in music and some in Hollywood, just having a slightly longer sideburn would become popular. It was actually at that time that I myself started adopting the sideburn. I actually wore a fairly long sideburn starting probably in my mid-20s, and I would wear a long sideburn for the most part of my adult life until I actually grew a beard. I actually look back and say, was I wearing a sideburn? Because at the time, like especially in the mid-80s, the Preppy handbook came out and Preppies became really popular, and I may have played around with a shorter sideburn. I always seemed to have a longer sideburn. And so why was that? It was actually the best and strongest part of my beard. If you remember, like I had significant trouble growing a full beard, and it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I would attempt to grow a full beard. I would grow a partial beard, in a circle beard, a goatee, Van Dyke, but I always seemed to have the longer sideburns. That took me till about 12 years ago when I was sporting a handlebar mustache with a longer sideburn, but I actually never grew a mutton chop. So today, who do you see wearing mutton chops? You don't see a lot of people wearing mutton chops, and the people that you see, again, are maybe counterculture or subgroups of culture. And so I think of the rockabillys, starting maybe with Stray Cats in the 80s and the 90s. A certain amount of music people would wear a longer sideburn, but it was really the greasers 2.0 as well as rockabilly people who would wear the mutton chop. But you recognize this guy with very long sideburns, fuller sideburns, even mutton chop with the pompadour, very kind of 1950s greaser look. That's probably about the only people. Maybe an occasional biker will wear a mutton chop or extreme sideburns, but for the most part, it is really not part of culture in the 2020s. What killed the mutton chop? I would actually say, in my opinion, what killed the mutton chop is the same thing that really put a damper on the solo mustache, and that is the beard. People seem to have a preference today for the full beard, and you see a lot more guys wearing the full beard. And so I really think, was there a chance that the mutton chop was really going to come back? Probably not. But if there was any chance at all, it was definitely silenced by the full beard. Will they come back? I don't know. I did a casual poll asking, about 20 people what they thought of certain beard patterns and partial beard patterns. And the mutton chop was at the bottom of the list with the whaler beard. These were two of the beards patterns, partial beard patterns that people did not like the most. Doesn't mean they don't look good, but people do have preferences. And, full beard, executive beard, stubble beard, solo mustache, circle beard, Van Dyke, all of those styles seem to be appreciated more for partial beards than does the mutton chop. I don't know if the mutton chop has a real chance of coming back. Maybe guys will start cutting up their beards again. I've seen guys online cutting their beards off in phases, ending up with a mustache. And a lot of them start with the mutton chop. Will that happen? Will guys actually start chopping the beard down in order to get mutton chops? We will see. But my prediction here is I don't think it's happening just yet. I think the beard has to go away first for there to be a resurgence of partial beard patterns. But time will only tell. What do you think? Do you think that you would ever rock the mutton chop? Can you actually see yourself wearing that? Comment below and let me know. Till we meet again.